Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Strong Book. I am Reed, and today we are going to be going over chapters 22 and 23 of the Dragonbone Chair. So, this chapter, chapter 22, opens in a quite interesting manner. We get a new perspective. We get the perspective of Guthwolf, the Earl of Utenheed. And right away, this kind of goes over what we know already about Guthwolf. He, I believe, is the king's hand the king, and he's, at least in the scenes that we have seen him in before, he has been more so presented as a crony of Elias. Obviously, now that we see his perspective, we get a little more of a better idea of who he is. He's a man who is almost not necessarily quick to anger. He is, but he's also somebody who wants, I think he's somebody who wants the best for Elias. He's a very loyal person, maybe loyal to a fault. And so the chapter opens with him being called into the throne room to speak with Elias. And right away it's clear that Elias, his health is continually just in this weird and strange state. And I will just read a little bit here. So this is page 332. Elias sat back in his throne as the Earl of Utenheed dropped to a knee before him. The king wore a black shirt trimmed with green and silver, and his boots and breeks were also black. The iron crown of Fingal sat high on his pale brow, and in a sheath at his side was the sword with the strange crossed hilt. He had not been without it in weeks, but Guthwolf had no idea whence it came. The king had never mentioned it, and there was something queer and unsettling about the blade. Things had changed between Guthwolf and his friend Elias, and the Earl of Utenheed did not like that. Elias had never been secretive, but now Guthwolf felt vast, hidden currents moving beneath the surface of daily events. Currents that the king pretended did not even exist. Things had changed, and Guthwolf felt sure he knew who was to blame. He looked past the king's shoulder at Priorites, who was watching him fixedly. When their eyes met, the red-robed priest lifted a hairless eyebrow as if in mocking question. So one of the things that Guthwolf goes in to tell or inform Elias is that Simon is still missing. Or, they don't know specifically that it is Simon, or, his name. I don't believe that, but they referred to him as Morgana's spy. Tells him that they haven't been captured yet. And then Elias tells Guthwolf what he would like for him to do. He tells him, I wish you to take 12 knights. Any more in Luth would have no choice but resist, and hie you to the Tague to beard the old miser in his den. Tell him to refuse me my rightful due is to slap my face, to spit on the very Dragonbone Chair. But be subtle, say nothing in front of his knights that will shame him into resistance. Nevertheless, make it clear that to deny me further will risk his walls falling in flames about his head. Make him fear Guthwolf. So Elias is wishing to send Guthwolf to Hernisadrark because they haven't been paying their rightful dues, their taxes, and Priorites wants Guthwolf to also keep an eye out for Simon, but Elias makes sure he wants Simon free. He wants any spies found to be brought back to be alive. And as Guthwolf kind of walks out, he meets with Fangbald, who has come back to the Hayholt. Fangbolt, of course, has been the one who's sort of been promised Miriamel's hand, and we learn that Miriamel is in Merrimond, recovering from a sickness, and Guthwolf kind of remarks to Fangbolt, or maybe it's Fangbolt to Guthwolf, but they're like, maybe Elias should be in that town, kind of getting some rest, because he would certainly need it. So then the chapter shifts further south to Nabon, and specifically to, I forget the name of the city already. The city of Nabon. Yeah, that's right. So it transitions, or no, excuse me. Before we get that, we get a little bit of interaction between. It shifts to Rachel's perspective before Aelair. Rachel's perspective, and one of her servant girls kind of accidentally creates a spill, and right as Fangbolt walks, and he slips, and he just slaps Rachel, and he's just so mad. And Rachel, she's one of the most interesting point of view characters in this series, because she, for being her character, where she's in the Hayhold constantly, and by and large, at least certainly right now, she's played a big role, certainly in the formation of Simon's character, but not a huge role. And kind of after dealing with Fangbolt assaulting her, essentially, she just thinks to herself, this must be what it's like to be laundry in the basket. You're getting old woman, old and useless. I'm just so tired. Sometimes I think I'm going to drop where I stand, fall over like a broken broom at the feet of these young monsters, stamping around my castle, treating us like we were dirt, and they'd probably just push me out with the dust. So tired. And she does, and in her dream that she has, Simon is not dead. But she remembers that there's work that needs to be doing, and she wakes up. So then it transitions to Aelair, and Aelair's in Nabon. And, of course, we have seen Duke Leobardus and his son, Benegaris. And, Aelair is kind of just taking it all in, and he's seeing a lot of the politicking that the big players in this head family, this head house in Nabon are taking. And there's just a lot of tension between Benegaris and Leobardus. Benegaris is very assertive, demanding. Even Leobardus kind of is like, whoa, my son is trying to order me around. And Leobardus says that to Benegaris' face. And Aelair kind of spends the afternoon walking through all of these halls, and he thinks of a lot of great things of Nabon, and I will kind of get to that here. This is page 343. Aelair walked in the Hall of Fountains, where jets of glimmering spray arced up to commingle as fine mist beneath the open latticework of the stone roof, and wondered if there was yet the will left in the Nabonai to fight, or whether they had simply come to terms with their own gradual diminution, so that Elias's provocations only served to drive them further into their beautiful, delicate shell. Where now were the men of greatness, like those who had carved Nabon's empire out of the rough stone of Ostenard, men like Tiagaris or Anatolus. Of course, he thought, there was Chimaris, a man who, had he not found in himself a stronger calling to serve than to be served, might have held the willing world in the palm of his hand. Chimaris might have been a mighty man indeed. And who are we Hernisteermen to speak, he wondered, since Hern the Great, what mighty men have risen up in our western lands. Tethtain, who took the Hayholt from Sulis? Perhaps, but what else? Where's Hernestier's hall of fountains? Where are our great palaces and churches? But of course, that is the difference. He looked out past the streaming fountains to the cathedral spine of the Cencellan Adenitis, the palace of the Lector and Mother Church. We of the Hernestieri do not look at the hill streams and say, how can I bring that to my home? We build our homes beside the stream. We do not have a faceless God to glorify with towers taller than the trees of the Circoil. We know that the gods live in the trees and in the bones of the earth and in the rivers that splash high as any fountain racing down from the Grand Spog mountains. We never wanted to rule the world, he smiled to himself, remembering the Teg at Hernisatark, a castle made not of stone but wood, oak-hearted, to match the hearts of his people. Really now all we want is to be left alone. Still, with all their years of conquest, perhaps these Naban folk have forgotten sometimes you have to fight for that, too. And he talks a little bit with the Duchess Nessalanta and begins to realize that she might have ambitions for Florian, or excuse me, not for Florian, but for, I believe, Fangbald, perhaps to marry her daughter. So Aelaire's, I mean, he's there as an emissary of the crown, certainly, but he's also there. It's more of a matter of observing. It's observing. He is the outsider into this, both from his position in the court of Erkenland, but also because he is a count of Nat Malak, he is a Hernestierman himself. And so to see this land, to see this politicking, Aelair, he is presented as a very suave man, but he is somebody who is always wary and always thinking, just trying to understand others and their motives. And he talks to Father Dinovan at the end about what the Book of Aden says about politicking. And Dinovan says that one of his favorite passages is, if your enemy comes to speak bearing a sword, open your door to him and speak, but keep your own sword at hand. If he comes to you empty-handed, greet him the same way, but if he comes to you bearing gifts, stand on your walls and cast stones down on him. Which is fascinating. So that's the end of chapter 22. And then with chapter 23, back into the heart, almost it's like the title of the chapter is like, well, we're now going back to Simon's story. It's just, we spent so much of the book, so much of that middle 100-odd pages just with, Isgrimner was in there a little bit, but it was mainly just Simon's storyline. And then we step out and we get a little bit of the politicking, a little bit of the politicking in the Hayholt, and then in Naban. So we kind of jump around to the other two other big points on the map. And this chapter is really great, chapter 23, because we get more of Benebic's backstory. Because after chapter 21, when Benebic tells Simon, I know, basically that he knew Dr. Morganus, Simon is his charge to take care of. He says, Benebic confirms that he is Canuck, and he had a master named Ukakuk. And Ukakuk was a great man, a great master who was in a league with Morganus. And one night, Ukakuk wanted to walk the road of dreams, and he did so. And he said, and what caught him was the things like Brother Dokias. Brother Dokias, when he sees those visions in his dreams right before he died, he sees those things too. And then Ukakuk dies, his master. And he buries his master, and right as he, you know, he's about to go, Benebik himself is about to go onward, but then he receives a note from Morghenus, probably one of the ravens that Morghenus sent out that night, that tells him Simon is in danger. He is the charge of Morghenus. He's Morghenus. Morghenus looked after Simon, so Benebik must now, because Morghenus knew Benebik's master, Ukakuk, he must now protect Simon. That Simon is heading to Naglemund, and Morghenus gives him some information. And so Benebik is kind of set on the trail almost, and they find him, or Benebik, that's how Benebik finds him and gets to him. But what's interesting is that Benebik does not know that Morghenus died. And I hadn't really realized this before this chapter, that Benebik didn't know, and I guess that makes sense, but Simon lets him know. And Benebik is just, he's stunned by it. And then Benebik, in kind of going through his master's things, there's a pendant of a scroll and a quill pen, and Simon's like, wait, Morghenus had that. And then Benebik reveals that Morghenus and Ukakuk, they were members of this group called the League of the Scroll. Benebik estimates that there are probably only 5 people left in the League. And this is how Benebik describes the League. Benebik says, "It is a group of learned people who share knowledge. I've heard my master saying, perhaps something more, but he would never tell me. I'm sorry to be saying this, Simon, but I'm afraid we must walk again." You know, he doesn't know much, and you know, they just must go towards Naglemund. And he mentions that they will try. There's a person in the forest that they must go see who can maybe help them reach Naglemund. And he mentions her name is Jaloe. I say Jaloe because that's just, I remember how the audiobook pronounced it was Jaloe. And Benebik calls her a wise woman, once known as a Velada, a Rimmersgard word. And so they end up setting out. And this is what Benebik tells Simon. He says, "Even though there are things that I cannot yet tell to you, we must be true companions. I need your trust. It is only the business of Elias' kingship that is at stake. It is not only the business of Elias' kingship that is at stake. We have lost, both of us, people who we were holding dearly, an old man and an old troll who knew much more than we are knowing. They are both afraid. Brother Dacaius, I'm thinking, died of fright. Something evil is waking, and we are foolish if we spend more time in the open ground." "What is waking, Benebik? What evil?" Dacaius said a name. I heard him just before he died. He said, "You need not." Benebik tried to interrupt, but Simon paid him no heed. He was growing tired of hints and suggestions. "Storm King." Benebik looked quickly around as though he expected something terrible to appear. "I know. The Storm King is a name of dread in the dark north, Simon, a name out of legends to frighten with, to conjure with. All I have are small words my master was giving me sometimes, but it is enough to make me sick with worry. The name is of itself a thing to wither crops, to bring bad fevers and bad dreaming." "Rain and bad weather?" Simon asked, looking up at the ugly, lowering sky. "And other things," Benebik replied, and touched his palm to his jacket just above his heart. And so that's the end of those 2 chapters. So not only do we get more of the politicking, but we get crucial bits of information of Benebik's background and how Benebik was able to find Simon and what they might be up against with the Storm King, this dread from the north. So these two chapters do a very good job of setting the table a little more. I mean, they're relatively light on action, but they're crucial all the same. So I don't think I have anything for spoilers today. So if you guys read 22 and 23, let me know what you think. And I will see you guys next time for the next couple chapters.